title this morning is Witness. Now you might be wondering, who is this? What qualifications has he got to teach you about witnessing, evangelism, mission? So I thought I'd start off with my qualifications. Is that okay? So let me take you back about 30 years ago, maybe 32 years ago, and I was a young teenager, and I was going to go on a mission, a kind of short-term summer mission. So a bit of context, I'd been saved the year before, and I'd encountered God. I'd been saved through a youth group on a Friday. You call it teens here, but it was youth for us. We meet in a basement. We met in a cellar down in Ammanford. It was amazing, very similar. And there I encountered God. I understood the gospel. Jesus changed my life. Then I started going to church on a Sunday morning, and every Sunday morning I listened to different people teaching through books of the Bible, and I was being equipped. I was being discipled. I started to learn what it meant to follow Jesus. And so come the summer, I wanted to engage. I wanted to witness. I wanted to reach out. So I signed up for a short-term mission, and the first country I went to, I remember my parents taking me. In fact, I've got a photo of me. Let's have a little look on the screen. Here's the photo of, well, I say it's me. I asked AI what it thought it looks like, and that's what AI. And so I remember going to Swansea train station, getting on the train station. I was going all the way, you'll never believe this, first ever mission trip, going to England. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. So anyway, we're going to England, this kind of place up in the north. I remember getting on the train, waving my mum and dad goodbye, being really excited. In those days, you had a physical Bible. I pulled out the Bible on the train. I sat in front of the table. And I can remember to this day, as a 16-year-old, praying to God, God, place someone in front of me on that table, and I'm going to convert them. So friends, I am utterly qualified. Now let me tell you what happened. Between Swansea and Birmingham, and I can remember it was Birmingham because it was the first time I ever went in, like, it seemed like an underground train station. And for a Welshman, I was like, going back down the mines, what's happening? But we went down, and I remember between Swansea and Birmingham, hundreds of people got on the train. Everybody was on seats, people were standing. No one sat on the table in front of me. I couldn't believe it. It was like, maybe God doesn't want me to share the gospel, or maybe people can sense my spiritual power. I don't know what's going on. And then in Birmingham, I can remember it to this day, a guy came on, walked down the train, I had my Bible in my hand, ready to witness. He sat down in front of me on the table. And the first thing I did was put my Bible in my bag, pulled up my Sony Walkman, and put my headphones on. So probably this is a better picture of what I looked like. And from Birmingham until the mission stop, I was crushed. So this morning, I stand up as a failure. What I'm going to share with you this morning is from a position of having failed and feeling utterly weak as a witness. So if you're here this morning and you feel weak as a witness, maybe you've tried to share the gospel and you failed, this sermon is for you, from a fellow traveller who's really, really struggled. And what I've found over the last kind of 30 years is a passage in the Bible that has really helped me. And it's become the kind of blueprint for how I share the gospel. So I want to share it with you. So if you've got a Bible, please turn to Luke chapter 24. Luke chapter 24. And it's Easter. Jesus has just risen from the dead. People can't quite believe what has happened, but the word hasn't spread everywhere yet. People have heard he has died, but not everybody has heard he's risen from the dead. And so I want to read the famous account of the road to Emmaus, Luke chapter 24, and I'm going to read from verse 13. So here we go, Luke chapter 24 from verse 13. Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast, and one of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened here in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and the rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we'd hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, It's the third day since all this took place. And in addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they'd seen visions of angels who said he was alive. Then some companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said. But they didn't see Jesus. He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it's nearly evening, the day's almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was with them at the table, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and he gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up, returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and praying. "It's true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. Okay, it's a famous passage. And what I want to show you from this passage this morning is how, I think the key to evangelism, or one of the insights I have to evangelism is like a game of Connect 4. Does anybody like Connect 4? I brought my Connect 4 this morning. Here's two ladies playing Connect 4. Connect 4 is a brilliant game, isn't it? Let me bring it up on the stage. And I want to show you this morning how you can, with your friends, connect them to the gospel. How you basically do evangelism Jesus' way. Because I think Jesus not only is the master evangelist, but he is the master of evangelism. It's all about him. So I've got 4 points because it's Connect 4. I actually think it's 3 points, but by now I can't change it because the game doesn't work, okay? So go with me. I'll point out where I think 2 points could become 1. But the first thing you want to do in evangelism, following the master, is this. The first thing we want to do is connect 1. What's the first point? We want to connect to people's lives. So think about what's happening. The two are on the road to Emmaus. They're doing this 7-mile walk. And what happens? Jesus comes and he walks with them. I love this. I love the fact that the risen Jesus walks with people. Now, when you see the word walk in the Bible, walk actually is significant. To walk with someone is to experience life with them, to have empathy for them, to understand them. To walk with someone is to inquire of someone, or my favorite word, to be curious. I think one of the biggest gifts you can have in society and in friendships is just be curious. Why are you thinking like that? Why did you say that? What do you mean by that? And so Jesus goes and walks with them. And it would seem to me that one of the best ways to share the gospel is not the only way, but one of the best ways is what we call personal evangelism. Life on life, walking with people. A book I read on evangelism a couple of years ago, which I found really helpful, is a book called How to Talk About Jesus Without Being That Guy. It's a great title, isn't it? How to Talk About Jesus Without Being That Guy, by a great kind of Australian evangelist called Sam Chan. And in the book, he says, what do you think people need to believe the gospel? He uses the posh term plausibility structures. It's nice, isn't it? Plausibility structures means basically, what does someone need to do to help you believe something, to make it plausible, to make it realistic? I wonder what you think. What do people need to believe the gospel? Now, I think some of you are thinking facts. They need evidence. Lots of us, perhaps, who were born in the 50s and 60s and the 70s, with that kind of modernist outlook, we're thinking, if only I could prove the resurrection, if only I could give evidences for the existence of God. Facts, evidence. Some of us are thinking, no, it's not about facts or evidence. It's about experience. If I could get them to the right event, if they could come away to something, if they could be here on a Sunday, if they sensed God, then actually that experience would show them that God is real. Now, I'm going to say, I think both of those are true. But actually, the research shows that actually facts is third in the ranking of plausibility structures. Experience is second. Do you know what's number one? The number one thing that makes the gospel more believable is community. It's community, alongside experience and evidence. But ultimately, it's community. So here's a question for you. If you go and see a GP, and let's say you don't know the GP, it's just a random GP. You've done well just to get there, haven't you? So you go and you see the GP. And you see the GP, they listen to all of you, and then they tell you the medication. Straight away you think, brilliant, the medication's great. And then afterwards you go out for a coffee with someone and they say, what was the medication again? Now this person has no medical experience, no medical qualifications, but they're a good friend and you've known them for years, and they say this: the side effects were terrible and it didn't help. Who are you going to believe? The GP, with all of their qualifications, or your friend who you know? It's fascinating, isn't it? Friends, community is huge. And so we need to see here that the first key, I think, to sharing the gospel, to witness, is walking with people. If I could encourage you to do anything, it would be to walk with people in life. You know, when we think about evangelism, some of us think we're qualified, some of us don't think we're qualified, some of us think we can talk about Jesus, others don't. The wonderful thing about evangelism as a community thing, as something we do together as church, is that we all have different gifts and they all get used in the process of someone becoming a Christian. Very rarely does someone become a Christian only knowing one Christian. It can happen, but generally someone comes to know the Lord when they know a community of people. And so in a community of people, they'll have talkers, they'll have bakers, people who can make, a cake or bring food around when things are struggling. They can have listeners, people who just listen and love, and they can have people who just play the fool and enjoy and have a bit of banter. And actually, all of those things together in community helps people. Let me tell you about Angela. I can still remember to this day Angela coming to church and being saved. But the reason she came to church, when I look at her life, is because she lived opposite another young mum. They had boys at the same time, and a couple of daughters as well. And so they grew up going to the school gates together. They grew up just kind of as young mums and then into middle age, and there was just friendship. And her neighbour across the road was a member of our church, and I would have said, if anybody in the church who was the least likely to share the gospel, it was her. There was no way she was going to come up the front of church. But she was a long-term friend. And what happened was, as the boys grew up, the boys of the kind of church home, they became Christians, and so they started inviting the other son to the youth group, to the teens on a Friday. And those relationships happened, and then her son was converted. I can still remember the day when he became a Christian. And so he went home and started telling his mother about the gospel. And then she started coming to church, and she made loads of friends. And then she did Alpha. And within Alpha, there were the ones who were making the food and making her feel welcome. There were the ones doing the talks. There were the ones in the group with her. Do you know, her walk of faith was a community thing of people with loads of different skills and sets. People you think might not be involved in evangelism, but really are. I think probably most of the people who walked with her wouldn't even consider themselves as being part of her journey. But they were. And so the key is to connect with people. Do you know, Jesus connected with people and walked with people so much. Do you know what they called him? Friend of sinners. Glutton. Drunkard. It's a good question, isn't it? Do we connect with people in such a way that actually that's how we would be called? I think there's something about evangelism which is just getting alongside people. And I think when we talk about this, it's really important to note it's not just in the good times, but it's also in the difficult times. Some of the best examples of evangelism I've ever come across are in cancer wards. The amount of Christians who come to see me who have cancer and have said, I was just having my treatment and I was sat next to someone and they asked me what I was reading. And it was a Christian book and I just showed them. And do you know what I've said? I'm going to pray for them and I'm going to ask my church to pray for them. So can we pray for them? Do you know what? At your weakest and most vulnerable point, there is opportunities for the gospel. And sometimes you can share the gospel with someone when everything goes wrong. I remember going to a meeting once. It was a Christian Union meeting in Aberystwyth in the university there. And a couple of new people had come. They'd never been to the Christian Union before. And the preacher got up and preached. And I'm going to be honest, he preached one of the worst sermons I've ever heard. He just got up and he went off on one. He just went off on one, just ranting about Catholics. And the guy sitting in front of me who'd never come before was brought up in a Catholic home. And I remember just seething, thinking, what is this guy doing? It was the worst. And so afterwards I thought, what do I do? So I did the only thing you can do. I went up and I apologized. I said, I don't know what that was about. He definitely is not being invited back. But can we go for a coffee tomorrow to chat about this? Can we go for a coffee tomorrow? Sometimes evangelism comes in the mess. And let's be honest, our lives are messy. Our lives are stressy. If you're going to wait to share the gospel for a good time, for a calm time, for an easy time, it ain't going to happen. I think really the best connections with people is in the mess of life. And not just their mess, but your mess. I think one of the best things we can do is to let people see us struggle. You know, if you're here this morning and you're not yet a Christian, thinking, this is strange, learning how to make Christians and I'm not yet a Christian. Can I tell you this? Sometimes people come to me and say things like, oh, I wish I had your faith. Or my life isn't like together enough to be a Christian. I'll sort my life out and then I'll become a Christian. Look, if you've got that impression of us, have a look around. It's really not true. None of us have got it all together. All of us struggle in one way or another. Even our faith is weak. The great thing actually about the Christian gospel is it's for people when they struggle in the reality of life. And so Jesus comes. Now, I think in Psalm 24, in Luke 24, there's a reversal of Psalm 1. I don't know if you've ever noticed this. I find it fascinating. Psalm 1 is really interesting. It starts up the book of Psalms and basically says, in life, be careful what you do because you don't want to walk with someone and then kind of walk with them in such a way that they influence you. So you stand with them, you get into deep conversation and listen with them, and then you sit with them and you end up mocking Jesus. It's basically saying, be careful of your influences. But then I'm telling you to live in such a way that people accuse you of being a drunkard. Now, how does that square with Psalm 1? Well, because what is Jesus doing in Luke 24? Have a look at this. Have a look at the text. I love this. So verse 13, what does he do? Verse 13, now the same day the two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking to each other about everything that was happening. So what are they doing? They are walking and talking. And so what happens? He comes, and verse 15, he walks along with them. So he walks with them intentionally. Then you have a look down at verse 17, and in verse 17 it says this, halfway through, they stood still, their faces downcast. He's walked with them, had a conversation, and now they've stood because they're listening to him. And then, when does it ultimately end up? Have a look, verse 30. When he was with them at the table, he sat down with them. Friends, the best process of evangelism, and I think the biblical process actually is to walk with people, to stand with them, but ultimately to sit with them. I think the best conversations happen around meals. I think the best conversations happen around coffee. I think we want to really become good friends. And so what he does when he's doing it, when he's connecting with them, is he asks them questions. That's what he does. He wants to know what's going on. He wants to hear from them. So that's the first point. I think if we want to share the gospel, connect one is to connect with their lives. But interestingly, in verse 20 to 24, if you have a look at what happens, Jesus says, what are you talking about? What are you worrying about? He's really interested in them. And then they say, well, about Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed with God and all the people. You think, man, they know a lot. Now, here's the difficult thing. Often when we're sharing the gospel with people, they don't know a lot. They don't know the Bible. There's different people, different backgrounds, but often they don't know much. But I do think we're in a kind of fascinating time at the moment. I'm sure you've heard the Bible Society are talking about this quiet revival. Whatever you think of the title, it seems to me that people at the moment are more open to spiritual things than I have ever seen. I've never seen anything like this as a Christian for 30 years, when people are really interested. And really, one of the dangers at the moment, which is one of the best things as well, is the internet. Is people are going onto the internet to find answers, but they're finding all manner of answers. And so I think at the moment there is a wonderful opportunity for us as Christians in this kind of quiet revival to walk with people and to ask them questions. What are you thinking? What's happening? What do you believe about this? Start conversations. And what we want to do then, secondly, here's the second move in Connect 4. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to connect them with the Bible. So that's what Jesus does. He listens to them, he connects with them, and then really where he wants to take them, verse 25, is to the Bible. So verse 25 he says to them, how foolish you are, slow to believe all the prophets have spoken. See, they had the Bible, but they didn't get it. And so verse 26, did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? And here's the famous verse, and beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. I think this is probably the greatest Bible study ever happened. Can you imagine sitting there with Jesus? And what I love about this is it seems he didn't like cherry pick verses, but what he did was he showed them the sweep of the Bible. The sweep of the Bible to show them actually how it's all about him. And I really think if we want to share the gospel with people, we need to show them the message of the Bible. Not my thinking and my clever ideas, but actually I want to get them into the Word of God, because ultimately this is the sword of the Spirit. Now that doesn't mean that I should always carry around a Bible. If you want to, that's fine, brilliant. I mean, you can probably have a Bible on your phone anyway. But what it does mean is I think we need to be prepared when we connect to people to connect them to the Bible. Let me show you a verse from the Bible. So actually when you're on that cancer ward and someone asks you what you're reading, if it's Psalm 23, tell them. And do you know what? Quote it to them. There's nothing wrong with saying Psalm 23 to someone, is there? Sometimes we need to get people into the Bible. Let me tell you about a couple of other people. Michelle was one of our neighbours. She went through a horrendous, one of the worst situations anybody could ever go through. Her whole life fell apart. And then one of her work colleagues, when she was going through all this, said, can I read the Bible with you? And gave her a Bible. And I remember when she turned up at church, nothing to do with us, she just turned up to church and she'd read all the Gospels. It's amazing, isn't it? Or Gene, I remember Gene, he was a student in a place called Lampeter. Man, if you've ended up there, you've got problems. But anyway, he was in Lampeter. So nothing to do, so he opened up the drawer, and in those days, he used to have a Gideon's Bible. And this is brilliant. Guess which book he decided to read first? Leviticus. I remember meeting Gene, and he had just read all of Leviticus. Or a girl I was talking to the other week, my friend's wife, Yana, she'd come over to the UK as an au pair, and her life, she just didn't know what she wanted to do, and so she felt compelled to just go on Amazon and order a Bible. And so the Bible came through. I mean, we've got to be willing to share the Bible with someone and all of the Bible. Now look, when people have a Bible, it is a huge book, and look, I've known people to read the Bible and just be saved on their own. God can do what he wants. I don't want to limit God. But I do find the best way to help people to connect to the Bible is to do it with them. So Yana, interestingly, just after she'd bought this Bible, she was on an au pair's WhatsApp group. Who knew there was such a thing? And on the au pair's WhatsApp group, they said there's a church with a bookshop next to it in Cardiff called the Heath. Should we go along? There's an international Bible study. And so she went along. And each week they would read the Bible. She was converted. Or what about Gene? I remember Gene. So he'd read Leviticus and he became a Christian. I mean, this is amazing. Like, how do you become a Christian reading Leviticus? And this is what he said. He said, I read Leviticus and I thought, those are crazy laws. But Christians don't have to follow them because Jesus has filled them all out, hasn't he? He's like, Jesus must be amazing. It's like, I think that would have taken me a long time to work out. But he got it. Friends, we've got to believe that if this is the sword of the Spirit, it is the Spirit who wields it. Don't be freaked out by giving people the Bible. These are the words of life. And so we hand it to them. So go back to Richard. I hope you can remember all these people. Richard was the one in Aberystwyth who was the Catholic who'd just been highly offended. And I took him for coffee. And I remember at the end of the coffee conversation thinking, I haven't answered any of your questions. I just remember at the end feeling utterly deflated and thinking, I don't think I've helped at all here. And at the time, I was helping lead a Christianity Explored. So I was like, should we do Christianity Explored together? The course had already started. So I like, we'll just do it, me and you. And we just started reading a gospel together. I felt utterly out of my depth. We'd missed the course. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity. And so, friends, if you are wanting to share the Bible or share the gospel, connect with people, connect them to the Bible, can I say this is how it works? This is why last week we talked about equip and discipleship. It's great to learn to kind of step out in faith and understand the Bible, because the more you understand it, the more you can share it. And honestly, sharing the Bible, you don't have to understand it all. You really don't. Because now this is where the 2 points could become one. Because here's Connect 3, okay? So Connect 3 is actually connect them to Jesus. Because what does Jesus do? He shows them the Bible. And what does it say in verse 27? Shows them everything concerning him. So actually, when you take people to the Bible, I'm going to probably offend some people now. When I offend people, I try to offend them all. I'm looking at the elders now, a little bit worried. But you don't need to take people to the Bible to prove your pet theories on different things about the world or life. Just take them to the Bible to see Jesus. Jean read Leviticus, and he saw Jesus. So if Jean can see Jesus in Leviticus on his own, I think you can show someone a part of the Bible and show them Jesus, honestly. Far more than you think. I remember those conversations with Richard. We were doing Christianity in my room, Christianity Explored. And I remember sometimes I would prep for hours, going through all the notes, trying to understand all the passage. And there were little bits in Mark's gospel that I really didn't understand, especially the early chapters with demon possession. I was like, this sounds freaky. How am I going to explain this? And I remember I'd spend hours prepping. We'd talk about it. He'd read a passage. He'd look at me and he'd just explain it. I'd be like, how did you get that? It took me 3 hours to figure that out. Friends, it's wonderful to know that, because this is the sword of the Spirit, the author who kind of got this to be written actually illuminates people, opens their eyes to see it. We need to understand that evangelism isn't a solo thing we do because we do it as community, but also evangelism isn't a solo thing we do because we do it with the Holy Spirit. We do it with Jesus. And so what we want to do is show people Jesus. That's why on week 1, when we were thinking about the gospel, we went through this. This idea of the gospel. And if you notice on this sheet, it goes all the way from creation to new creation. The gospel is all of the Bible. And Jesus is all the way throughout it. And we want to show people the good news of Jesus. I truly believe that when you encounter the good news of Jesus, I truly believe that you want to talk about Jesus. In effect, encounter, equip, and kind of engage the world. Really, encounter automatically goes to engage. If you encounter Jesus, you will engage others. And if you want to engage well, be equipped. So let me ask you my 2 favorite questions. So women here who have been engaged, how many of you did the course on banging on about your engagement ring? Did any of you do that course? But how many of you showed it off? You don't have to teach someone to talk about their engagement ring. They just show everyone. Grandparents. How many of you have been on the course showing pictures of the grandkids? Have you ever been on that course? No, you can't help yourself. You just show it. Jesus. Look, it's great to go on courses for evangelism. I'll teach them myself. But actually, if you love Jesus, you speak about Jesus. He's an overflow. I think the best preparation for evangelism is encounter. If you're worshiping Jesus and living for him, and if he is a reality in your life, you will speak for him. I love the way one of my favorite stories in the Bible is in John's Gospel. Do you remember Jesus? He's really thirsty, he's tired, so he's by the well, it's midday, sees the woman from Samaria, and she's hiding from everyone. What I love is in that most difficult of times when he's tired, he shared the gospel. It's great, isn't it? He didn't wait for the mess to be cleared up. And in fact, there was some historical mess between their people groups, but he still shared the gospel. But what I love about her is, even though she'd come midday to hide from everybody, having met Jesus, do you remember what she did? She runs back to the very people she'd hidden from and tells them, come and meet a man who knew everything I ever did. There's something about the gospel that is so freeing and life-giving that you want to talk about him, you want to share about him. I think what happens is, as Christians, we start off desperate to share the gospel. So I was 15 when I became a Christian. Straight away, I was like, I want to be the best evangelist in the world. 2-hour craft lessons, I was like, they're stuck on a table with me. I'm going to tell them all about Jesus. I mean, I was just desperate. But within 2 years, it's funny, isn't it? I'd become nervous, lost my confidence, become a little bit cynical about sharing my faith. I don't know if anybody else has had that kind of experience. So if you're here this morning and you're in that place of having lost your confidence or even feeling cynical about it, please don't think I'm judging your faith. I'm not, because I'm with you, I'm a fellow traveller. I'm saying this happens to all of us. Actually, it's one of the cycles of the Christian faith. Because we live in a fallen world in fallen bodies and we struggle. Do you know what? I think we get kind of worn down. And the answer to that wearing down is encounter with Jesus. To see him more. And the more we see him, the more we talk of him. And sometimes the best way to get back into it is just to start talking about him again. Start telling people. Now, some of you are thinking, yeah, I'd love to do this, but I just don't know the answers. I don't know where I'd open the Bible. I don't know how I'd get to Jesus. I know the questions they're going to ask me. I don't know the answers to the questions. Can I say, if you're a person who feels like in an evangelistic conversation you want to say, I don't know, can I say you are the best evangelist in the room? I think the best answer to an evangelistic question that you don't know the answer to is the answer, I don't know. Some people think, if I say I don't know, that's it, it's game over. No, it's not. Do you know what's brilliant about saying I don't know? Number one, it proves you're not in a cult. In cults, they all know the answers and they're exactly the same. So if we all start saying the same thing, run a mile. That's a cult. The second thing it shows is you don't have to understand and know everything to become a Christian. That's really helpful. Because when I became a Christian, I definitely didn't know everything. I can still remember my prayer. Lord, if you're there, I want to give my life to you. I mean, it's wonderful to show that. But here's the third and best thing about saying I don't know. Third and best thing about saying I don't know is you can say, but can we meet for a coffee next week? Give me a chance to have a read about this, to have a talk about this, to talk to some friends in church about this. Or even, do you fancy coming over for food? I'm going to invite someone else from church. They've read a book on this. They're pretty good on it. And before you know it, what are you doing? You're connecting with lives. You're giving more opportunities to show them the Bible and to help people to find the answers in there. And so look, even if you feel completely unqualified, out of your depth or cold to this, honestly, you can get back into it. You know, I used to think, though, that at this point, I used to think that, do you know what? I think evangelism is like learning to swim. I was like, do you know what? What you do, you just get the kid and you chuck it into the pool. I mean, the cough would splutter, but ultimately, they'll work it out, and I'm pretty sure. Noah's got some terrible stories about that. It turns out that's not true. But I think, you know, I used to think you just jump in and you learn to swim. Can I say, actually, I don't think evangelism's that easy. And I want to be honest, because I don't want you to walk out and think, oh yeah, okay, I can do this, it's easy. In fact, I think evangelism's a little bit more like this. Let me tell you about a friend of mine. He's gone to glory now. His name was Peter Jackson. He was an evangelist, but he was a blind evangelist and a piano player, piano tuner. He used to preach the gospel, and he was one of my heroes, and he kind of helped disciple me. And I remember at one point in the church we were in, we were thinking of building a new building. And I remember in one of the planning meetings thinking, when we build it, we should have a room named after Peter, which is a bit bad because he was still alive. But I was like, let's just show our appreciation and have the Peter Jackson room. And I can remember, do you ever have these flights of fancy? Thinking about the day that we finally built it. And, we'd have to put a plaque there, wouldn't we? This room in honor of Peter Jackson, our blind pianist evangelist. And, well, if we're going to have a plaque, you're going to have an unveiling, isn't it? We'll probably get someone local dignitary to come. So we'll put a kind of curtain in front of it and we'll get Peter there. And it'd be an amazing day, wouldn't it? Peter there, all his family, and then behind this curtain, this plaque. And what's the problem then, isn't it? You can't see the plaque. So what would you do? Well, you'd have to get rid of the curtain, wouldn't you? You'd have to open the curtain. We kind of think of that as maybe apologetics or evangelism. We're helping people open the curtain. But even then, he can't see the plaque. He's blind. It's impossible. And I've come to the conclusion that actually connecting people with Jesus is impossible. I'm really sorry. Actually, if you walk out of this sermon thinking you can do it, you really can't. I definitely can't. As I said, I stand here as a failure, which is why we need Connect 4. Here's the fourth point. What is Connect 4? Finally, well, this. What do we need to do? We need to connect people to the power of the gospel. We need to connect people to the power of the gospel. Have a look at verse 30 to 35. See the conclusion of the passage. So he's at the table with them, he's connected with them, he's listened with them, he's taken them to the Bible, and then we find out what actually has been happening. Verse 31, and remember, this is Jesus sharing the gospel, and he still needs this to happen. Verse 31, then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. But listen on, it says even more, they asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us when he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? Friends, something supernatural was happening here. And if you want to be someone who witnesses, you've got to understand the supernatural element of this. Yes, I connect with lives. Yes, I connect to the Bible. Yes, I connect them to Jesus and who he is in the Bible. But I've got to understand that actually this is a supernatural spiritual work. You see, encounter is important, not just because of the historical encounter you've had in becoming a Christian, but because of the present encounter you have with the power of the Spirit. And actually, when you are sharing the gospel, what did I say? This isn't a solo thing. It's you and the community. And it's not a solo thing. It's you and the Spirit. Do you know what? I think I used to think of this passage as just an example. So there's Jesus. He walked on the road to Emmaus and he connected with their lives, connected with the Bible, connected with him. So what do I need to do? I need to go and walk with people. I need to connect with their lives, connect with the Bible, connect with Jesus. That's what I need to do. No. That's not the meaning of the passage. See, Jesus is still walking with me. And Jesus is walking with you. Which when you are sharing the gospel, you've got to believe that Jesus is walking with you. But there's even more. When you're walking with someone and connecting with them, and Jesus is walking with you, he's also walking with them. Friends, the Spirit isn't just at work in your life, the Spirit is at work in their life. I love thinking about the 3D work of the Spirit in this. Have you ever thought about this? So here's the sword of the Spirit at work illuminating. There's the Spirit in you helping you to share, but the Spirit's at work in them, opening their eyes. Friends, evangelism, we're a part of it. But it's really not about us. We're going along for the journey with Jesus. It's amazing, isn't it? Do you remember the train? Do you remember when I was really glum? Do you know what happened at the end of that train journey? I smiled at the guy, he smiled back at me, put my Bible in my bag, and I was waiting until we got to the destination. I got off the train, I could see the other people from the mission team, and I went up to them and I said, "Hi, I'm here. I don't know what use I'm going to be on this mission week, but I'm ready for it." They said, "Oh, that's fine, we're just waiting for the last member of the mission team to arrive." And it was the guy I'd sat opposite. Now, before you're harsh with me, he didn't try and share the gospel with me either. But do you know what? I went off that train crushed. But once I saw him, I had confidence. I felt as if God was telling me, "John, how hard could it have been? I'm with you. This isn't about you." That really changed my life, that experience. And Jesus comes and walks with us. So let's go back to Peter Jackson, the blind evangelist. You see, I can put the plaque up, I can open the curtains, but he needs to be able to see. And do you know what Jesus is in the business of doing? Giving the blind sight. Friends, we share the gospel faltering, failing, struggling, but Jesus will open the eyes. Let me run through the people. Angela, with a friend across the road, the boys growing up together. I can still remember the day I was in my office and I was busy and she knocked on the door. And I'm honest, I was annoyed. I wanted to write a sermon on evangelism. Didn't want to talk to someone about the gospel. And I remember within 3 minutes, Angela was crying and had given her heart to the Lord. Friends, what had I done in that? Me? Nothing. That was the church. That was the other mum. She'd literally come in and I didn't even want to do it. But the Spirit did it. Or what about Yana, the au pair who came? You know, she shares her story. The most important point to her was when she was just in this small little car. She's reading the Bible and she sensed the Lord. Friends, sometimes it's in our weakest points when God uses us. We've just got to be willing to do it. Some of us, do you know, we've been trying to connect with people for years. We're connecting with people, and do you know what? It's just not worked. We just can't win. It's horrible, isn't it, when you can't win Connect 4? So for you, you're stuffed. Nah, you're not at all. Do you know what I love about Connect 4? Just start again. Just start again. Friends, it's not a game, but as well, do you know what? If you failed or faltered or given up, it doesn't matter. Start again. God is in the business of starting again. I wonder, who's on your mind this morning that you're thinking, I really want them to be saved? Friends, start again. Connect with them. Listen to them. Get them into the Bible. Pray for them. One of the things I love in our community group at the moment is they've asked each of us to pray for someone and for someone they're praying for. That's wonderful, isn't it? Why? Power of the gospel. Friends, the band are going to come up and lead us in worship. And at this point, you know, what do you sing after something like this? I love to sing, you know, hymns like Facing a Task Unfinished or We Rest on Thee. But actually, we're going to sing a song of praise that reminds us of the gospel, that reminds us that we have come out of darkness. And you know, the image this morning has been one of walking, hasn't it? Jesus walking with us. What I love about this song is it picks up on the image of Jesus. Actually, he doesn't just walk with us. What does he do? He runs towards us. He runs towards us. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that you have given us the privilege and the honor of being your witnesses. And Father, many of us feel unqualified. Many of us feel disqualified. But Father, you want to use us. Father, you want us to be partners with you in the gospel. Father, we thank you for your great commission that reminds us that we go because all authority in heaven and earth has been given to you. And Father, that when we go, you promise that you are always with us to the very end of the age. So Father, would we go? Would we be your witnesses